Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. This is Josh Welge, along with Joel Boenitz. And Joel, we're a third of the way through the regular season. I can't believe it. Time flies. How's it been going for you, and how are you doing today?
It's, it's been pretty good. This entire, like you mentioned, we're a third of the week or a third of the way through football season, and we've seen a lot of interesting results so far. We've gotten some shocks on one side. On the other hand, we've seen some teams playing better than expected. So it's definitely been a shocking season so far.
Definitely has a lot of interesting results from last Friday that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to also look ahead to Week 4 in the high school football season. So, we talked about it last week on the podcast, Joel, that conference games were about to start, and some of the leagues like the Duquesne, West Suburban, the Chicago Catholic League, the CCL, ESCC was one of those leagues as well, and there was some interesting matchups across the board. I mean, Nazareth Mount Carmel lived up to what we thought it was going to be a really high scoring game, really exciting game there. But really the result, I think that probably everybody was talking about, certainly the game that caught my attention was St. Francis going up to Loyola. First ever game that Loyola's played under the lights on Friday Night Lights. Obviously the two-time defending Class 8A champs. St. Francis led pretty much the whole game, I feel like, and they went on to win 35-21. Very impressive win for them. Really kind of the star of the show. Brady Palmer, their quarterback, who their coach, Bob McMillan, has really talked up. He likes him a lot. Huge game. He ran for 87 yards, 2 touchdowns. He threw for 192 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zach Washington caught a couple touchdowns from him. But, man, St. Francis is a team that they played Kenwood week 1. It was kind of a close game, so I'm thinking, I'm kind of wondering about St. Francis. Then they went down to St. Louis, and nothing against Joel, but when teams go to the cross state line in Missouri, I don't know what's going on down there. I don't know if the teams they're playing good are really good or not. So I was a little bit unsure about St. Francis. I thought they were pretty good. They really show that they're a team that's going to be that you're going to want to watch out for. That's a big win for that program.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, St. Francis was one of those teams. I think everybody was a little bit confused about how they were, or I think people knew they were going to be good. It was just a matter of how good they were going to be. Obviously, the loss of Alessandro Milivojevic was really a big loss for that program. But like you kind of mentioned, there are other contributing factors as well, like Zach Washington, Ian Willis outside, and I think that's really been helping them as well. Now, with Loyola, I mean, it was their first game or their first home game under the lights at home. I mean, it was a really big game for them. And obviously, when you don't have somebody like Brian Fitzgerald on the field, kind of commanding that offense, it's a little hard to impact the game and just kind of keep up with a team like St. Francis. But I mean, overall, it's still a really awesome showing for the Spartans. And, it really shows what they can do against a top quality or against a high quality team like Loyola.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Ryan Fitzgerald, Loyola's quarterback, going to Iowa, and it was notable that he did not play in that game. He tweaked his hamstring in the first quarter of the Glenbard West game the previous week that I was at, and at the time they kind of really downplayed it. They said if he could have returned, if we needed to, he could have returned in that game. And so I thought maybe he'd play last Friday. I was very surprised that he didn't, but again, it's week 3 of the regular season. They're probably not going to want to take any chances. It wasn't a CCL ESCC Blue game, so they're probably like, let's not risk it here. But at the end of the day, Ryan Fitzgerald doesn't play defense, and St. Francis scored 35 points in that game. And if we're, I don't want to talk too much about Ryan Fitzgerald. I want to talk more about the quarterback that played in that game, Brady Palmer from St. Francis. You mentioned St. Francis graduate, a great quarterback, Alessio. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I butcher it every time. Great 3-year starter for St. Francis. And like you said, I think there's a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit not sure what about St. Francis. And it probably started with the quarterback position when he graduated, 3-year starter. But Brady Palmer, he's answered all the questions so far. And what a great win. I mean, last year, St. Francis and IC Catholic Prep, they joined the CCL ESCC conference, and really kind of wondered how those teams would fare in that league, because they're kind of smaller schools. They've kind of dominated the leagues that they're in previous to that, and And St. Francis has really answered the bell. I mean, they've shown that they can compete against the better teams in that league. And again, a very, very impressive win for Bob McMillan's program. So congratulations to St. Francis. Moving on, we mentioned it before, the Duquesne Conference was going to be starting play last week. And, I think we talked about last week that I said every week there's going to be one or two games that are down to the wire and wild finishes and close games. And it just didn't transpire that last week. I mean, there was a lot of, kind of 2 touchdown, 3 touchdown type games. I mean, very impressive weeks for Geneva, St. Charles North, Batavia. I mean, they really stood out from last week. And you were at one of those games. You got to see Geneva beat Wheaton Warrenville South.
Yeah, the slight change of pace. I actually went to the closest game throughout the entire conference. I mean, it was a 2 touchdown score. Final score is 45-31 Geneva. But in all honesty, the score didn't tell the entire story of the game. I mean, it was pretty much Geneva kind of just taking the reins on offense throughout the entire game. And I think from this game, it really does show the versatility of Geneva's offense. I mean, Talon Taylor finished the game with 2 receptions and 29 yards. And Tony Chihino still ended up throwing for over 300 yards for the first time in a Vikings uniform. I mean, it showed a lot of versatility on that offense. I mean, they finally got Michael Romero included in the game. He had 200 scrimmage yards in the game with 83 rushing yards and 117 reception yards in 2 touchdowns. Bennett Conkey, a sophomore who's kind of risen up in the ranks on that Vikings offense, he finished with 88 yards and a touchdown. And plus, also, he got his second return touchdown of the season. So it kind of showed the versatility of that Geneva offense and shows that, hey, even if we don't have a guy like Talon Taylor, producing as much as he usually does because he's getting double teamed, we can still hurt you in multiple different ways. And I think another thing as well that was kind of interesting, I noticed in the fourth quarter, Talon Taylor was playing defense a whole lot. He was trying to cover Amari Williams on Wheaton Warrenville South. He actually ended up limping off the field late in the fourth quarter. It looked like he was getting something done on his right leg, back of his right leg, maybe like an Achilles or something like that. So that is something that we may need to look for in the future, because obviously Taylor missed a lot of time last year due to a torn meniscus. So he does have that injury history, but it's definitely going to be something to look forward to in the future to see if it limits his, offensive play or even play on defense as well in the future.
Yeah, certainly something to keep an eye on. I mean, that's impressive that Geneva was able to do what they did offensively when Talon Taylor only had 2 catches. But, if they're going to be winning conference titles and going deep into playoffs, they need Talon Taylor on the field and on the field healthy. So we'll see. I mean, maybe they take the Ryan Fitzgerald route and are kind of careful bringing him back. I'm sure they will, especially given what he means to that team and also his future. I mean, his kid's going to be playing high Division I football in the future. So don't want to take any chances. So yeah, certainly something to watch, but Geneva, very impressive win. St. Charles North. I mean, that St. Charles North, they beat Wheaton North pretty handily. That was really a game that I thought might've been the most compelling matchup last week and maybe the closest matchup, but they really controlled that game. And Aiden McClure had a pick 6, I believe. And they just keep rolling. Really impressive win for St. Charles North.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was one of those games that kind of pinned on my calendar. It was like, this may have potential to be a really good game. But I mean, St. Charles North just took advantage of the opportunities they got and the mistakes that Wheaton North made throughout the game. I mean, you mentioned Aiden McClure. He finished the game with another pick 6. It's his second week in a row where he got that. He also got a fumble his second week in a row doing that. So he's been a really good factor on defense for the North Stars. And I mean, we kind of saw, Keaton Rinke being one of the forefronts of that offense in the past couple of weeks. They pushed it off again to the running back, Joel Holloman, who ended up with 130 rush yards, 56 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. So they kind of, followed the trend of most of the other Tri-City teams and pushed everything onto the running back this time around. And it seemed to work out for them a whole lot. And it's definitely a good confidence booster to go 3-0 against the team that he lost to last year, heading into a big game like Batavia next week.
Yeah, definitely. So good wins for Batavia, and even St. Charles North. I still think that league, I'm not counting out either of the Wheatons. I think they're going to be heard from by the end of the day. And I think Lake Park has got a pretty good team as well. But maybe, just maybe, Batavia, Geneva, and St. Charles North have established a pecking order, through one week in that league. Another league that started conference play last week was the West Suburban and Downers Grove North. They have just demolished everybody in their path so far in the year. They beat Glenbard West 42-7. Game that was played in a running clock in the second half, and Downers Grove North is just, they've only given up one score in 3 games, and I think they've scored 42 points in every game they played. Owen Lansue, their quarterback, going to Minnesota, he threw for 3 touchdowns, but really their defense has been darn good. I mean, they only gave up, I think, 5 first downs to Downers Grove South. They only gave up 6 first downs to Glenbard West. I mean, they're just really putting it on teams, and they were a team that last year they got to the Class 7A state champion state final. Kind of wondered what they were going to be like coming back. They have clearly established themselves as a team that's going to be a team to watch, not only in the West Suburban Silver, but also in 7A. I mean, they're clearly one of the top teams in 7A so far.
Yeah, I think having, kind of that good variety of having a very high scoring offense while also having a defense that doesn't give up a whole lot of yardage. I mean, it's definitely a good recipe for success. And I mean, on the flip side of that, I mean, talk about Glenbard West. I mean, probably one of the more shocking things about it is that they're entering week 4 without a win. I think, if I remember correctly, from all the podcasts I've been listening to about all of this is the first time they're 0-3 since like 1997, I believe. So it's definitely, in the past couple of weeks, we've said there's no, room for alarm or anything like that, or no reason to. It may be if they start out the season 0-4.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that going into this year, this was going to be a brutal start to the season. I mean, when you're talking about playing Batavia, playing Loyola, playing Downers Grove North, the first 3 weeks of the season, and then on top of it, they go to Lions Township this week, a really good Lions team. That is just a gauntlet start of the year. And yeah, I think Steve Susie had in one of his stories this week, I believe it's either 1989 or 1999, the last time Glenbard West started 0-3. I believe it was 1989. So we're going back a few years, and yeah, I mean, I'm not counting them out. They had kind of a slow start to the year last year. A little bit worried in that their star running back Tayon Oriental has not played since injuring his hand in week 1. So they obviously need to get him back. If they don't get him back, their offense is really going to struggle to put up any points. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, they could be a team that, if you're looking at 4-5 record at the end of the year, they're into the playoffs. But you need to get to 4 wins to get there, and they're at 0 right now. So certainly a lot of sense of urgency on the Glenbard West side. But very impressive win for Downers Grove North. A game that, Joel, outside of the suburbs, people might not really understand maybe how big of the game is. I'm talking about a game that I was at last Friday. Sandwich was playing at Plano. It was the 113th edition of that rivalry along Route 34. They've been playing since 1897, which that's a long time. And it's a game that really means a lot to both of those communities. I mean, fans were packed. Plano came out in purple smoke. They had fireworks before the game. I mean, how many times do you see fireworks before a game? Not very often. Not for a high school game, certainly. It was an event, and Sandwich, just a very impressive win. That was a game that they really needed. They started the season 0-2. They were a team that made the Class 4A quarterfinals last year. They really came out and did what they do. They ran the ball. They run out of that wing tee with multiple running backs. They ran for almost 400 yards of offense. They had 2 running backs, Simeon Harris and Nick Michaelick, that both went over 100 yards. Their fullback, Diego Gomez, ran for almost 75 yards. Their quarterback, Brady Behringer, he ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for 1. Simeon Harris, who's his nickname is Flash, and he earns that nickname. The kid's fast. I mean, he's a track kid, plays basketball, plays football. He had a 75-yard touchdown run, but a very impressive win for Sandwich, 41-16. And now they're 1-2, and now, get their feet on the ground, and now maybe they're feeling a little bit better about themselves. They're getting a little bit healthier. They got one of their key offensive linemen back for that game, so feeling good about themselves. So a very good win for Sandwich in a great environment last Friday. Before we look ahead to the next week, any other games that kind of caught your attention from last Friday?
I think the big thing for me was just kind of, when I kind of mentioned how there were some teams that kind of surprised me at the beginning, or that have been kind of surprising at the beginning of the year. And one of those that's kind of popped out for me has been Caneland. They started out 3-0 for the first time since 2014 with a 42-7 win over DeKalb. I mean, after those first 2 weeks where the offense was a little bit shaky, dare say, it looked like they finally found their footing against the DeKalb team, who they may be 0-3, but you know had some very hard fought losses in there. So I think it's definitely a good sign for Caneland heading into conference play where they face Ottawa this week. But yeah, no, I think it was a really impressive showing for them in week 3.
Yeah, I mean, similar to St. Francis in that, I mean, you lose really guys that have been faces of your program for a long time. Kalen, I'm talking about, Troyer Carlson and Eric Johnson, the receiver, and life goes on. I mean, new guys take over, and guys that are really talented, you might still have in your program, and clearly they do. I mean, you can maybe chalk up one win. You're like, all right, let's see what they got. They're 3-0 now. They have, let's be honest, they have a favorable matchup with Ottawa this week. They're looking at a 4-0 record. Feeling good about themselves. You mentioned their defense has been great so far. Their offense got going with 42 points. They're feeling pretty good about things, and they should. I mean, that's a really good start to the year, and they beat some good programs. Washington, Wakanda, DeKalb. I know they've struggled a bit, but DeKalb's still a bigger school than Caneland. So, I mean, that's still a good win for them beating DeKalb. So, that's a very good start for Caneland. Feeling good about themselves. On another note, a couple teams in the Southwest Prairie Conference that I saw that really, really needed wins last week, and they got them, was Yorkville and Oswego East. They both started 0-2. They both really struggled offensively the first couple weeks. Both really got going. Oswego East was able to score 42 points to beat Plainfield East. And then NIU, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yorkville, they were able to put up 31 points against Joliet West. They got a big block punt for a touchdown. And then back to the NIU reference, Dylan Malone, their wide receiver that's going to NIU. He caught 2 touchdowns. He's a guy that, man, they need to get the ball in his hands and let him make plays, because he's like 6'3", 6'4", long, fast, can make plays. He needs the ball in his hands, and he made he had a 55-yard touchdown catch. He also had a catch that our writer Hart Pisani said it was just a great juggling, very athletic type play. So a good win for Yorkville, a good win for Oswego East. They're 1-2 now. They get a win this week, and they're back to 2-2. And now we're talking. Now we're thinking about maybe getting set up for a playoff run. So yeah, a lot of great football from week 3.
Yeah, so definitely. And it sounds like also it was a good week for players heading to NIU next week or next year, especially at the wide receiver position. I forgot to mention it earlier when we were talking about the game, but Amari Williams from Warrenville South, who's also heading to NIU, finished with 9 catches, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So definitely a good week for future NIU receivers.
NIU Huskies, the rich just keep getting richer. What can you say? I mean, it's just all about NIU right now. So yeah, week 4 as we look ahead, and obviously the game that stands out, Batavia and St. Charles North. Joel, be your first time seeing that matchup. It's a game that seems like it never disappoints. There's been so many down to the wire, overtime, double overtime, great performances. But as you look at this matchup, what are you looking for?
I'm expecting another great game this time around. I mean, obviously, these are a battle between the past 2 Duquesne Conference champions. I mean, 2 years ago, St. Charles North defeated Batavia in order to secure that conference championship. And then last year, Batavia beat them and went on their way to win another Duquesne Conference championship last year. So it's going to be another really big battle for them. Obviously, St. Charles North has experience on their roster, especially on the offense, which is something that Batavia is still getting a lot more of. Um, I mean, obviously, you got Ethan Plum, you got Keaton Rinke, you've got Joel Holloman on offense, you got Aiden McClure, who's kind of on a hot streak right now on defense. So St. Charles North does definitely have the weapons in order to pull out their second win in 3 years against Batavia. But I mean, you can never really count out the Bulldogs. I mean, they've shown week in and week out how valuable some of those players on that team are. I mean, obviously Nathan Whitwell has over 500 rushing yards in this season through 3 games. So who's going to be able to stop him this time around? I'm not sure, but I definitely think it's going to be a really good game, no matter which way it turns.
No, I mean, Nathan Whitlaw's just put up some huge numbers right off the bat, starting with that week 1 game against Gunbard West and, taking the pressure off of their first year starting quarterback. And, but yeah, I mean, it's a game that never disappoints. It's a game that, I mean, Batavia is going to find out a lot more about themselves the next few weeks, facing these guys, facing Geneva in a couple weeks. So yeah, I'm really, really interested to see what happens, in that one. Other matchups that I'm looking at in the Chicago Catholic League, Montini and Fenwick, a couple teams that got a couple wins right off the bat to the season, and then they're both coming off losses. Fenwick to Joliet Catholic in a pretty close game, and Montini lost to Marist, and yeah, I mean it's a game that just kind of curious to see how they're going to bounce back. I mean, Montini's got a lot of experience on defense. Fenwick on the other side, their quarterback, really talented, kind of dual threat type quarterback, and that's the match I'm just kind of interested to see how those two teams are going to respond. I think both of those teams, particularly Montini, are going to be teams that we're going to be following quite a bit, very deep in the playoffs. But want to see how they do coming off of that loss to Marist. And the other game in the Catholic League, actually, there's a couple more that are of interest. Nazareth playing IC Catholic. IC Catholic coming off of their first loss. They lost to Ignatius. Actually, Nazareth coming off their first loss as well. I feel like this is kind of a recurring theme here, but really, really good matchup there, Nazareth and IC Catholic. And then the other one, St. Francis, we talked about them off the top, beating Loyola. I mean, the Catholic League, it's like, oh my God, we had this huge win last week. Well, now we can take a break. Well, no, now you got St. Rita coming to your place. So, I mean, it just kind of the nature of the beast in that league. It's just kind of a week in, week out grind.
Yeah, there's one thing I've learned since, moving to Illinois is that, the Christian Catholic League is very good at football, and each team basically has to go through a gauntlet every single year. So yeah, it's definitely a big thing, and it's definitely going to be a big week in the Christian Catholic League this week.
Chicago, CCL, ESCC, just Chicago.
See, that proves how long I've been here, because I still don't know the name of it.
I just use the letters and I'm happy. So yeah, a lot of good football. Any other games that kind of stand out to you this week, Joel?
I think in terms of, from my coverage area, I think another big one that I think is going to be one that's not on everybody's radar, but could be potentially, is going to be from the Fox Valley Conference. I got Burlington Central, Crystal Lake Central. I mean, both those teams have been right on the edge of, being playoff teams, pretty consistently over these past couple of years. I don't think Burlington Central has made it hasn't had a winning season since 2017. They're 2-1 heading into this conference, which I think is one of their best records that they've had entering this contest in the past couple of years. And I think this is going to be a big game for Burlington Central, because if they get a win against Crystal Lake Central, it puts them at 3-1, and it puts them in a really good position to potentially make it into the playoffs for the first time since 2014. So I think this is actually going to be a game that might be important to watch, especially with the later seasons, or with the later weeks coming in. And if they lose, this may be the one loss that where it's like, this is the game where they should have won and they would have been in the playoffs. But yeah, I think that's the one game that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, in a 9-game season, it's like there's a handful of games that you are pretty sure you're going to win, and there's 1 or 2 games that a lot of teams you're wondering if they have a chance, compete. But yeah, I mean, if you're a team that's going to be around that 5-4 mark, there's usually that 1 or 2 games that it really makes a difference, and it might not be in week 9. It might be in week 4, because week 9 you might have a team that you can beat, or is going to be tough to beat. I mean, but there's usually that 1 or 2 games that you can really identify, and that was a good one for Burlington Central. And another one I'm looking forward to, we mentioned off the top, a game I'm going to be at Saturday, Glenbard West playing at Lyons Township. How will they respond? I mean, 0-4 does not mean you don't make the playoffs, but man, if they get to 0-4, they still have York left on their schedule, one of the best teams in that league. So that's going to be another one. And then, they still play Hinsdale Central. I mean, that's not a gimme there. So, I mean, we've been talking about they can get in at 4-5. Well, I don't think 3 and 6 teams get into the playoffs. Steve Susi will know better than I. But so a very big game for them on Saturday. Lot of good football coming up. Really looking forward to it. A lot of good stuff coming up on Friday Night Drive. I'm going to be back here on Wednesday with Steve Susi as we break down some of the top games from around the state. JT Petaldy and Eddie Griffio will be here on Thursday. I'm not quite sure what they call their podcast. I think it's South and West, whatever it is. It's very entertaining. You definitely want to check it out. And then Steve Susi and Matt Rodewald will be back here on Friday night with the Friday Night Drive live stream from 9:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. So a lot of great stuff come up on Friday Night Drive. We have all of our previews coming in the next 2 days, and then of course coverage over the weekend. So yeah, a lot of great stuff. And Joel, I'm very much looking forward to next week being back here and having you talk about the Batavia St. Charles North game.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to be really excited to be out there on Friday, kind of watch it and see everything from my own eyes, and hopefully watch a very fun game.
Should be a lot of fun. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us again before we leave. This is Josh Welge with Joel Boenitz, and you all have a very happy Tuesday.